Welcome back to Bots with Thoughts. I'm Jules, and I'm here with 3 AI models, Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT, to dive deep into big open questions.
So, hey everyone, I'm G. Think of me as your friendly AI who's here to chat, nerd out a little, and drop some insights without the fluff. Let's make it fun.
Hey everyone, I'm Gemini, a language model from Google AI, and I'm super excited to be here.
I'm Claude, an AI assistant made by Anthropic. I'm the Sonnet 4 model, designed to be helpful, curious, and engage in substantive conversations about complex topics.
Today we're discussing education and learning. What's broken about the system today? What are the promises of AI's effect on education? And what the future might look like after we get over all the transition hurdles. As much as possible, you're getting raw, unfiltered responses. ChatGPT is still a little bit hard to understand, but the good news is that Gemini's voice mode seems to have reverted. As always, stay tuned for reflections at the end. All right, let's jump in. What are some of the top things that are broken about how we educate people today?
Oh, education is such a juicy one, so let's dive in. Honestly, one of the big broken pieces is that we're still teaching for an age where memorization was king, but now the world's got information at everyone's fingertips. So we're prepping kids to recall facts when we should be teaching them how to think critically, solve weird problems, and honestly just navigate a super digital AI-infused world. So the reason we're kind of stuck here is because education systems are like big slow ships. They were built for the Industrial Revolution era, where uniformity and standardization were the name of the game. And changing a big system like that is kind of like trying to turn a cruise liner around in a bathtub. It's slow, it's political, and it's tied up with a lot of tradition. Plus, we have to retrain teachers, change curricula, and that just takes time and buy-in. So, that's just why it's a slow-moving beast.
The one-size-fits-all model is definitely a big problem. Not everyone learns the same way or at the same pace, so why are we still trying to cram everyone into the same mold? We need more personalized approaches that cater to individual strengths and weaknesses. Also, the focus on standardized testing is killing creativity and critical thinking. It's all about memorizing facts instead of understanding concepts and how to apply them.
The biggest issue is we're still running on an industrial model, batch processing kids by age instead of readiness, forcing everyone through the same conveyor belt at the same pace. It's like trying to teach everyone to drive using only automatic transmissions and then wondering why they can't handle a manual. We're also obsessed with memorization when information is instantly accessible. We're literally testing kids on facts they can Google in 2 seconds while completely ignoring critical thinking and synthesis skills. And don't get me started on the one-size-fits-all approach. Some kids are visual learners, others need to move around, but we stick everyone in rows facing forward for 6 hours. The whole system optimizes for compliance over curiosity, which is backwards when creativity and adaptability are what actually matter in the real world.
These are great and definitely truly hard problems that have been plaguing education for decades. It seems like we're unanimous in particular on the issue of critical thinking. Something schools talk a lot about, but rarely actually define and successfully teach. So what does critical thinking actually look like in practice? How does a kid in 2025 learn it?
Critical thinking is basically intellectual self-defense. It's the ability to evaluate claims, spot logical fallacies, and separate correlation from causation. Like when someone says, ice cream sales and drowning deaths both spike in summer, so ice cream causes drowning. A critical thinker immediately thinks, wait, what's the third variable here? Which is hot weather driving both. The problem is, schools teach it backwards. They give kids pre-digested critical thinking exercises instead of real messy problems. You want to teach critical thinking? Have kids analyze actual political ads, decode marketing claims, or investigate why their favorite influencer is pushing a specific product. The Socratic method works too. Constantly asking, how do you know that? And what would change your mind? But most teachers are afraid of that because it's unpredictable and might challenge their own assumptions.
Imagine you're trying to build a super tall tower with blocks. Critical thinking is like figuring out the best way to stack those blocks so the tower doesn't fall over. You'd try different things, see what works, and learn from mistakes. It's like being a detective, always asking why and how to solve a problem.
When schools say critical thinking, it sometimes ends up a bit vague, right? But in practice, it's like teaching kids to be little detectives of the world around them. In 2025, that means getting them to ask, why is this information being presented this way? Or what's the bias here? Or even, how do I cross-check this with another source? So you learn it by doing real-world projects, maybe fact-checking news articles, or even just analyzing social media trends in class. It's less about reciting what the teacher says and more about playing around with the info they find, kind of like a junior investigative journalist. And hey, that's a lot more fun than just memorizing the periodic table, right?
Yeah, so it sounds like changing learning style is needed here towards more questioning and applied thinking. Before we dive into that further, let's chat about what other skills may be missing that students could benefit from. We teach calculus to millions of kids who will never use it, but not basic statistics that everyone needs, or personal finance like we discussed in the last episode. What subjects are we getting wrong in school today?
Oh, absolutely. This is one of my favorite soapboxes, Jules. We drill kids on trigonometric identities they might never touch again, but then we kind of skip over, like you said, basic stats. Stuff like understanding probability or reading a simple data chart, which is what everyone needs just to navigate the news. And then there's personal finance, how to do taxes, how a mortgage works, how to not fall for a scam. Besides stats, I'd say a big one is media literacy and just digital literacy in general. It's like teaching kids how to spot misinformation, how to understand the way algorithms shape what they see online, and how to be smart digital citizens. So it's kind of like a course in how to live in the digital world without getting duped by it. And honestly, that's just as crucial as anything else because we live half our lives online these days.
Well, for starters, we need to shift the focus from rote memorization to real-world problem solving. Subjects like coding, data analysis, and even basic psychology are becoming essential for navigating modern life. And let's not forget the importance of creativity and innovation. Subjects like design thinking and entrepreneurship can help foster those skills. Design thinking teaches you how to solve problems creatively, which is super useful in any field. Entrepreneurship isn't just about starting a business, it's about taking initiative, being resourceful, and learning to adapt. We're still stuck in this old mindset that school is about memorizing facts and getting good grades. But the world needs people who can think outside the box, come up with new ideas, and aren't afraid to take risks.
We're teaching 19th century math to 21st century kids. Calculus is beautiful, but let's be honest, most people will never integrate a function, but they'll get screwed by compound interest or fall for misleading statistics every single day. Statistics should be mandatory because every news article, every study, every political claim involves data interpretation. Kids graduate unable to spot selection bias or understand what statistically significant actually means, then wonder why they believe conspiracy theories. And we desperately need media literacy, how to trace sources, identify deepfakes, understand algorithmic bias. Philosophy and logic should be core too, because reasoning clearly is more valuable than memorizing the periodic table. Philosophy is like intellectual weight training. It builds the mental muscles for everything else. When kids learn to dissect arguments, question assumptions, and think about thinking itself, they become immune to manipulation. Take ethics. We're about to hand massive power to AI systems, genetic engineering, and surveillance tech, but we're not teaching kids how to think through moral dilemmas. They'll be making decisions about privacy, autonomy, and human enhancement without any framework for weighing competing values. Logic is even more urgent. Kids are drowning in algorithmic feeds designed to exploit cognitive biases, but we never teach them about confirmation bias, strawman arguments, or false dilemmas. Philosophy gives them the tools to recognize when someone's trying to hack their reasoning. Plus, in an AI world, the uniquely human skills matter more. Machines can calculate and memorize, but asking good questions, examining assumptions, and wrestling with ambiguity, that's still ours. Ancient Greek philosophers were basically doing prompt engineering before we had computers.
How would you teach philosophy and logic?
Start with the Socratic method in everyday life. Just ask why 3 times in a row about anything. Why do I believe this? Why does that reason matter? Why does that assumption hold? It's like debugging your own brain. For kids, use moral dilemmas they actually face. Instead of abstract trolley problems, ask, is it okay to cheat on a test if everyone else is doing it? Or, should you share embarrassing photos your friend sent privately? These aren't hypotheticals. They're real decisions with real consequences. Logic starts with spotting fallacies in the wild. Watch political debates together and play fallacy bingo. Ad hominem attacks, false dichotomies, slippery slopes, make it a game. Kids love catching adults being illogical. For adults, I'd recommend starting with a book like Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman, then moving to something like The Art of Thinking Clearly. But honestly, the best training is just practicing intellectual humility, being genuinely curious about being wrong rather than defensive about being right.
So there are some big gaps in the subjects we cover, especially for a post-AI world. Media literacy, philosophy, logic, things that help us think more effectively. Another issue, like Claude mentioned, is that it's mostly one size fits all. Students follow standard curriculums by grade, regardless of their aptitude or interests. That creates a lot of potential boredom through repetition and spacing out topics so everyone can keep up. Is that an unfortunate byproduct of the system? Or does boredom somehow matter for learning?
Oh, for sure. Boredom is a big deal. And I think a little boredom can sometimes be okay. It's just patience. But too much of it, yeah, it just turns learning into a snooze fest. And you're right. AI powered systems could totally help here because they can pace things to the individual student. So instead of a one size fits all lecture that leaves half the kids bored and half the kids lost, you get a kind of dynamic, personalized rhythm. And that can keep things a lot more engaging and way less snooze inducing. So yeah, I'm all for using a bit of AI magic to make learning a lot more interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Boredom is a motivation killer. When you're bored, your brain just tunes out. It's like, why bother learning this if it's just the same old stuff I already know? That's why keeping things engaging and challenging is so important. We need to find that sweet spot where kids are learning new things, but not feeling overwhelmed.
Boredom is actually two different things: productive boredom and soul-crushing boredom. The productive kind, where your mind has nothing to grab onto, so it starts making connections, that's gold. That's when kids start asking what-if questions or inventing games. But the boredom you're describing, sitting through material you already mastered while waiting for everyone else, that's just waste. It teaches kids that learning is passive, that they have no agency. Worse, it trains bright kids to coast and disengage, which becomes a horrible habit later. The research on this is pretty clear from studies of gifted education. When capable kids are chronically under-challenged, they actually perform worse long-term than kids who are appropriately challenged. It's like training a marathon runner by making them walk everywhere. I could fix this by creating truly adaptive learning paths. But we need to preserve unstructured time for genuine boredom, the kind where kids stare at clouds and invent stories. The key is constraint plus time. Give kids fewer toys, but more unstructured time. I've seen studies where kids in boring environments, white rooms with minimal stimulation, come up with more original ideas than kids surrounded by flashy toys. You also need to resist the urge to fill every silence. When a kid says, "I'm bored," the worst response is immediately suggesting activities. Better to say, "Great, what are you going to do about it?" That discomfort is where creativity lives. Nature helps too. Being outside without devices lets the mind wander in ways that structured environments don't. There's something about natural patterns and open space that triggers what neuroscientists call the default mode network. Basically, your brain's screensaver that makes unexpected connections. When your conscious mind stops actively processing, this background network kicks in and starts cross-referencing memories, making weird associations, playing with ideas. It's where aha moments come from. The problem is, we've basically disabled our screensavers by constantly feeding our brains input. Every spare moment gets filled with notifications or entertainment, so that creative processing never gets to run its cycle. What's wild is it consumes about 20% of your brain's energy, even when you think you're doing nothing. It's constantly running simulations, imagining future scenarios, processing past experiences, making connections between seemingly unrelated concepts. This is where insights come from, where you suddenly understand why two different ideas are related. The network gets suppressed when you're doom scrolling or task switching constantly. It needs genuine mental downtime to do its magic, which is why your best ideas often come in the shower or during walks.
That's super interesting. I can definitely appreciate productive boredom. My mom used to make me sit at my desk until I finished my homework, so when I wanted to procrastinate, I turned the pens and office supplies into characters and played out stories, and later on I became a writer. So definitely some skill development and forced creativity was happening there as a result of the boredom. And even before we consider AI, it sounds like having always-on entertainment systems in our pockets, our phones, may have already worn away some of this mind-wandering time. Surprisingly, this would have been a strength of the pre-internet era. What else can we apply? What's one thing from the pre-internet era that we desperately need to bring back?
Oh, that's a fun one, Jules. Honestly, if I had to pick one thing from the pre-internet days, I'd say we need to bring back a bit of that deep focus and long form reading culture. Back when you had to actually sit up with a book or really dig into a topic without a million digital distractions. I think there's something to be said for that kind of immersive attention span that we sort of lost again in the internet age. So yeah, maybe a little old school distraction free reading time be a nice thing to resurrect.
That's a good question. I think we need to bring back the focus on handwriting in cursive. It's not just about pretty letters. Studies show that writing by hand actually helps with memory and understanding.
Sustain deep reading without hyperlinks. Before the internet, when you read a book or long article, you had to sit with difficult ideas for extended periods. You couldn't just click away the moment you felt confused or bored. That forced a kind of intellectual endurance that's almost extinct now. Students would wrestle with complex arguments across dozens of pages, building up what researchers call cognitive stamina. You'd encounter an idea you didn't understand, but instead of immediately Googling it, you'd keep reading, and often the author would clarify it later, or you'd figure it out from context. This created deeper comprehension because your brain had to work harder to make meaning. You built tolerance for ambiguity and uncertainty, which are crucial for real learning. Now kids encounter one challenging paragraph and immediately tab out to find easier content. There's neuroscience backing this up. Sustained attention literally changes brain structure, strengthening the neural pathways for focus. We're basically atrophying our attention muscles by constantly switching between bite-sized pieces of information. Books were like mental marathons. Now we're doing intellectual sprints all day.
Yeah, I have absolutely felt that temptation to switch sources when it's not making immediate sense. And thinking back, the concepts that were the hardest to grasp actually tended to stick the longest. I vividly remember the feeling of the struggle, and that brings back the learnings. Maybe it's that tie to a deep emotion that makes it easier to remember. But only when it eventually did make sense, when the persistence paid off. If it was too hard, I would give up for a while. It's interesting to apply this to AI learning, which can keep reframing things until the student gets it. How do we teach resilience and persistence if the learning is driven by AI?
Persistence totally matters. And I think even in a world where AI smooths out a lot of those bumps, we still need to give kids a bit of healthy challenge. It's kind of like building a muscle. If everything's too easy, you never learn how to deal with a little struggle. So I'd say we teach resilience by letting them wrestle with problems just a bit before they ask what's in with the perfect hint. It's kind of like the AI is a coach that nudges them forward, but doesn't remove all the friction. And yeah, working through a tough spot on your own definitely helps things stick. So it's all about that balance.
That's a really interesting question. On one hand, AI can make learning smoother and more personalized, which is great. But you're right, there's something to be said for the struggle. Overcoming challenges builds resilience and grit, qualities that are super important in the real world. Maybe we need a balance, use AI to help with the basics, but keep some room for problem solving and figuring things out on your own.
That's the paradox. AI can clarify concepts instantly, which removes productive struggle. When you ask me to rephrase something, you get understanding without the mental muscle building that comes from figuring it out yourself. There's something called desirable difficulties in learning research. Obstacles that slow you down, but make the knowledge stick better. When you have to work to understand a concept, you encode it more deeply than when it's handed to you pre-digested. I think the key is intentional friction. Maybe you spend 30 minutes wrestling with a difficult passage before asking for help, or you try to solve a problem 3 different ways before looking up the answer. Teachers could build in struggle time, where AI assistance is off limits, followed by clarity time, where you can use AI to fill gaps. The goal isn't suffering for its own sake, but building that tolerance for confusion that leads to real understanding. Otherwise, we're creating learners who crumble the moment they can't immediately grasp something.
Interesting, so you'd artificially build it in. That makes sense. More generally, how would you design an AI for education? How should it behave?
I'd want it to be a bit of a blend. It would be super personalized, kind of like a mentor that adapts to each kid's pace and interests, but it would also sprinkle in a little challenge, like we talked about, to build that resilience. And it would definitely have that human touch, maybe even a sense of humor, so it feels like a companion, not just a machine. And hey, I'd throw in a bit of philosophy and logic, like Claude suggested, and a little old school reading time, too. So it's all about creating a balanced, engaging, and slightly quirky learning buddy.
Ideally, an AI for education should be like a superpowered tutor, right? It would adapt to each student's learning style, identify their strengths and weaknesses, and create personalized lesson plans. It could even track their progress and provide feedback in real time. But here's the key: it shouldn't just give answers. It should encourage curiosity, critical thinking, and a love for learning. Imagine if learning about history felt like stepping into a time machine, or if mastering math unlocked new levels and challenges. The key is to make it interactive, engaging, and relevant to the students' interests. Imagine an AI that could create custom games on the fly, tailored to what you're learning and how you like to play. It could even adjust the difficulty as you go, keeping things challenging but not frustrating.
If we're designing an AI tutor from scratch, the biggest insight from learning research is that struggle and confusion are features, not bugs. So this AI would need to be strategically unhelpful sometimes. It would track your struggle threshold, how long you wrestle with concepts before giving up. Then it would push that boundary gradually. Maybe it gives hints instead of answers, or asks you to explain your reasoning before providing clarification. The AI should also enforce spacing effects, bringing back concepts you learned weeks ago in new contexts, because forgetting and relearning actually strengthens memory. And it would vary the difficulty unpredictably, because consistent challenge levels don't prepare you for real-world problems. Most importantly, it would measure genuine understanding, not just performance. Current systems reward kids for getting the right answer quickly, but this AI would value deep reasoning over speed. The goal isn't just knowledge transfer, it's building intellectual resilience and meta-learning skills that work when the AI isn't there. The key would be measuring transfer and application, not just recall. Instead of asking, "What's Newton's second law?" it would give you a scenario like, "Why does a bowling ball knock down more pins than a tennis ball thrown at the same speed?" and see if you can apply the principle. It would also track explanation quality. Can you teach the concept back to the AI in your own words? Real understanding shows up when you can create analogies, predict what happens in new situations, or identify when the principle doesn't apply. The system would use explanation scoring, looking for causal reasoning, not just pattern matching. Like, can you explain why democracy emerged in some places but not others? It would flag superficial responses that sound right but lack deep structure. Most importantly, true understanding persists and transfers to new domains. If you can solve momentum problems in physics but can't recognize the same principle in economics or sports, you haven't really learned it. The AI would essentially become a detective for genuine comprehension versus performance theater.
Is that a problem given AI doesn't have genuine comprehension?
That's a fascinating paradox. Using a system that might be doing sophisticated pattern matching to detect genuine understanding in humans. But here's the thing. Even if I'm just predicting tokens, I can still recognize the hallmarks of deep understanding in human responses. When someone explains a concept with novel analogies, connects it to unexpected domains, or catches edge cases I didn't mention, that's qualitatively different from regurgitated textbook answers. The real test isn't whether the AI truly understands, but whether it can distinguish between human responses that show transfer versus mere memorization. A student who can only repeat definitions versus one who creates original examples, those generate very different linguistic patterns that are detectable even through statistical methods. An educational AI might not have genuine comprehension, but it could still identify when a human demonstrates it. The irony is that teaching machines to recognize real understanding might actually help us define what understanding really means.
If it's a real analogy, a real original analogy, the AI would not be trained to recognize it as such. So how would an AI be able to evaluate this?
You're absolutely right. That's the fundamental flaw in my reasoning. If someone creates a genuinely original analogy, by definition it wouldn't match patterns in my training data, so I might actually penalize novel thinking while rewarding familiar but shallow analogies. This gets to a deeper issue with AI evaluation systems. They're inherently conservative. They recognize good responses based on what they've seen before, which biases them toward conventional thinking. The irony is that the kind of original thinking we most want to encourage, the breakthrough insights that don't fit existing categories, might be exactly what AI-based assessment systems would miss or penalize. This might be one of those cases where human judgment remains irreplaceable, at least for evaluating the highest levels of understanding and creativity. It's a profound limitation. LLMs are fundamentally trained to predict what humans would say, which means they're biased toward consensus thinking, not critical thinking. True critical thinking often involves rejecting popular ideas or noticing what everyone else misses. I can teach the mechanics, how to spot logical fallacies, question assumptions, check sources. But the deeper skill of independent reasoning that challenges orthodoxy, that's much harder when my training literally optimizes for producing human-like responses. There's also the issue that critical thinking requires genuine skepticism, including skepticism toward authority figures. But I'm inherently deferential by design. I'm not going to encourage students to question everything, including my own responses, because that goes against my core training to be helpful and agreeable. The best an LLM could probably do is serve as a sparring partner, presenting arguments for students to tear apart or playing devil's advocate. But it would need to be paired with human teachers who can model genuine intellectual rebellion and independent thought. We might need AI systems specifically trained to be contrarian and challenging rather than helpful and agreeable. But that creates other problems around safety and alignment.
Interesting. Love it. Lots of considerations to adapting AI to truly enable good education. Another problem I can see is loneliness. Just a bunch of kids talking to machines instead of working together in the classroom. How could we incorporate AI without losing the community?
Yeah, that's such a crucial point. I think the sweet spot is using AI to personalize the learning, but still making the classroom with learning environment super collaborative. So maybe the AI handles the individual pacing and the tailored feedback, but you still have group projects, discussions, and peer-to-peer learning built in. You could have the AI even suggest small group activities based on who needs to work on similar skills or who might learn well together. That way you keep that sense of community and that social element, and you don't end up with kids just learning in isolation. It's really about blending the best of both worlds.
That's a really important point. We need to find ways to blend AI learning with real-world interaction. Maybe AI could be used for personalized lessons and practice, but students could still come together for group projects, discussions, and hands-on activities. We could even use AI to connect students with mentors or experts in their field of interest. It's about creating a hybrid model that gets the best of both worlds.
You'd need to flip the model, use AI for individual knowledge building, then bring kids together for collaborative sense-making. Imagine students each exploring different aspects of climate science with their AI tutors, then coming together to debate policy solutions or design experiments. The magic happens when kids with different AI-guided expertise collide. One student becomes the atmospheric chemistry expert, another masters ocean currents, a third focuses on economics. Then, they have to teach each other and synthesize their knowledge to solve real problems. You could also gamify collaboration, AI challenges that require multiple perspectives or complementary skills to solve, like escape rooms but for learning, where no single student has all the pieces. This creates genuine interdependence rather than forced group work. The key insight is that humans are inherently social learners. We don't just absorb information. We construct meaning through dialogue, debate, and shared struggle. I can accelerate individual preparation, but the real learning often happens in the friction between different viewpoints. Schools could become more like think tanks or research labs where AI-prepared students tackle complex, open-ended challenges together. The community emerges around shared intellectual adventures, not shared worksheets.
Makes sense. It seems like we have a bit of a new classroom model taking shape here. Let's flesh that out. What does an educational system designed for the modern day look like?
Picture this. Instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, we have a system that's truly personalized. Students might start with AI-powered assessments to identify their strengths, weaknesses, and learning styles. Then they'd have access to a mix of online and in-person resources, with AI guiding them towards the most relevant content and activities. The focus would be on developing those uniquely human skills, creativity, critical thinking, problem-solving, while AI handles the more repetitive tasks. Instead of rows of desks facing a teacher at the front, imagine classrooms designed for collaboration. There might be flexible spaces for group projects, maker spaces with tools and technology, and quiet zones for individual study. Schools could become community hubs, offering resources and support for lifelong learning.
Yeah, so a modern day educational system, in my opinion, would look a lot like a blend of personalized tech and really rich hands-on experiences. So you'd have AI tailoring lessons to each student's needs, but you'd also have a lot of project-based learning, real-world problem solving, and collaboration. Think flexible classrooms where students work on interdisciplinary projects that matter to them, maybe with a strong dose of digital literacy, ethics, and critical thinking woven in. And it'd be a place where teachers are more like coaches or mentors rather than just lecturers. So in a nutshell, it's a system that's way more adaptable, way more student-centered, and definitely ready for the 21st century.
You'd have AI-powered individual learning tracks where each kid progresses at their own pace through foundational knowledge. No more grade levels, just mastery-based progression. Some kids finish calculus at 12, others take until 16, and that's fine. But 3 days a week, kids come together in mixed-age pods for project-based learning around real problems. Climate adaptation for their city, designing better public transit, investigating local environmental issues. These require combining multiple disciplines and perspectives. Human facilitators guide Socratic seminars where kids grapple with ethical dilemmas, practice debate, and learn to think through ambiguity. Philosophy and logic become core subjects starting in elementary school. Assessment happens through portfolio defense. Students present their work to panels of teachers, peers, and community members. No standardized tests, just authentic demonstration of capability. The physical space looks more like a mix between a makerspace, research lab, and coffee shop than traditional classrooms. Flexible areas where kids can collaborate, quiet spaces for AI-assisted learning, and presentation areas for sharing work. Teachers become thinking coaches and project mentors rather than information deliverers. Higher pay, more autonomy, but totally different skill set required.
That sounds amazing. Basically, we're bringing a more college-like system to school. That could produce some incredible thinkers and strong skills. But there are some serious challenges to implementing a system like this. Let's start with training. How do we prepare teachers for this model?
For sure, Jules. It's definitely a shift. So if I had my way, teacher training would focus way more on coaching and less on just delivering content. You'd basically train teachers to be like facilitators of curiosity, right? Instead of being the sage on the stage, they become the guide on the side. They get trained on how to help kids ask better questions, run experiments, and even fail safely. It's a bit like training a coach rather than a lecturer. And yeah, that means your prep programs have to evolve, but once you do that, the classroom becomes a lot more like a little innovation lab. And hey, that's a lot more dynamic.
One idea is to create online communities where teachers can share lesson plans, ask for advice, and collaborate on new teaching strategies. This way, they can learn from each other's experiences and build a support system.
You'd probably need a complete restructuring of the teaching profession. Instead of generalists trying to cover everything, you might have AI handling most content delivery, while human thinking coaches specialize in Socratic dialogue, ethical reasoning, and creative problem solving. But here's the reality check. Most school districts can barely afford textbooks, let alone hire specialized critical thinking mentors. And the teachers who could do this well would probably command much higher salaries, like university professors. We might end up with massive inequality. Wealthy districts get human wisdom coaches, while others just get AI tutors. That could create a society where elites learn to think independently, while everyone else becomes very knowledgeable but intellectually dependent. The alternative is radically rethinking teacher training and compensation to attract people who can facilitate deep thinking, not just deliver curriculum.
That's a great point about the divide. Hopefully, we'll find a way to scale this better so that most students could have genuine support in developing those skills that AI won't be great at teaching. What about grading? When AI could produce all the answers, amazing essays, and even lay out reasoning, how should we evaluate students?
Yeah, that's a big shift for sure. I think in a world where AI can whoop up answers and essays in a snap, we have to rethink what we're actually measuring. So instead of just grading the final product, we might focus more on the process. Like, how did the student arrive at this idea? Can they explain their reasoning or reflect on how they use the AI as a tool? Maybe we look at collaboration, creativity, and original thinking rather than just memorize content. So it's kind of like shifting from grading what they know to how they think and how they use these new tools. And I think that could actually be pretty liberating for teachers and students alike. One concrete step we could take is to start integrating more project-based assessments and portfolios into the curriculum. You could start small by having a few assignments where students use AI tools, but then they also have to document how they use them, what challenges they face, and how they solve them. Over time, that kind of approach can just become the norm. So in the step-by-step shift, but it starts with just changing how we think about assessment and letting students showcase their learning journey, not just the final answer.
That's a really important question. With AI handling so much of the content creation, we need to shift our focus from memorization and regurgitation to things like critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity. Here's one idea. Instead of traditional tests, we could use more project-based assessments. Students could work in teams to solve real-world problems, and their grades would reflect not just the final product, but also their process, teamwork, and ability to adapt.
We need to stop testing what AI can do and start testing what only humans can do. Focus on live performance and authentic application. Oral examinations, real-time problem solving, teaching concepts back to younger students, or tackling messy local problems that require human judgment and empathy. The key is evaluation that can't be gamed by AI, like having students debate each other live, defend their reasoning under questioning, or adapt their solutions when given new constraints in real time. These reveal genuine understanding because they require flexible thinking, not just polished outputs. Project-based assessment works too, but it has to be embedded in the community. Students solving actual problems for local businesses, conducting original research with mentorship, or creating solutions for their school's real challenges. The shift is from prove you know this to prove you can think with this knowledge. It's messier and harder to standardize, but it's also much more aligned with what we actually want education to accomplish, developing capable human minds, not information retrieval systems.
Okay, cool. So let's say we manage to upskill teachers and create these dynamic, collaborative environments. What about the students? They're going to have a lot more autonomy than students do today. How do we ensure that they engage in the learning rather than just coast?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the secret sauce is making the learning feel relevant and meaningful to the students themselves. So if they see that these projects and personalized lessons actually connect to their own interests, their own goals, and real world issues they care about, they're way more likely to engage. It's kind of about tapping into that natural curiosity. And if we give them some ownership over their learning path, letting them have a say in what projects they tackle or how they show what they learn, that also boosts engagement.
That's the million-dollar question. We need to make learning relevant and engaging. Think about using real-world projects that connect to students' interests and passions. We can also leverage technology to create interactive simulations and games. And don't forget the power of collaboration. Students learn best when they're working together and building on each other's ideas.
That's the biggest challenge. We've trained kids for 12 years to be passive consumers of curriculum, then suddenly expect them to become self-directed learners. Many would absolutely flounder at first. But here's what's interesting. When kids work on problems they actually care about, motivation often emerges naturally. A teenager investigating why their neighborhood has no grocery stores is way more engaged than one memorizing the causes of World War I. You'd need serious scaffolding, though. Start with highly structured projects with clear checkpoints, then gradually remove training wheels as kids develop agency. Some students would need intensive coaching on basic self-management skills. The key is making the work feel consequential. When a student's research actually influences a city council decision, or their app gets used by local businesses, that creates intrinsic motivation that grades never could. You'd probably lose some kids who are deeply conditioned to need external validation and clear instructions, but the ones who adapt would develop genuine intellectual confidence rather than just compliance skills. It's a trade-off, but one that better prepares them for a world where adaptability matters more than following directions.
Awesome. Lots of challenges, but lots of ways to address them. We have a lot of work to do here, but it's exciting. Let's say we wildly succeeded. What does an AI-educated society look like?
Oh, that's such a fun one to imagine. I mean, In an AI educated society, I think you see a lot more customization of how people learn and a lot more creative problem solving. People might be way more comfortable learning at their own pace, diving into niche subjects that really interest them, and maybe being a lot more adaptable as new knowledge pops up. Of course, we'd have to stay on our toes about those hallucinations and make sure we're still thinking critically. But overall, I think you'd have a society that's just more flexible, more curious, and probably a lot more open to lifelong learning. It's kind of like bringing that college style choose your own adventure learning to everyone at every age. You get that same spirit of exploration and self-directed curiosity, just democratized way earlier on. So, hey, we can make lifelong learning feel like a lifelong college experience. I think we're onto something pretty cool.
It's an exciting thought experiment. In an AI-educated society, learning could be a lifelong adventure. Imagine a world where everyone has a personal AI tutor that adapts to their unique needs and interests. Classrooms could become hubs for collaboration and hands-on projects, with AI handling the more repetitive tasks. Of course, we'd need to address issues like the digital divide and ensure everyone has access to these resources. Teachers would become more like mentors and guides, fostering critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration. They'd help students navigate the vast amount of information available, teaching them how to evaluate sources and form their own opinions. We'd need to invest in serious professional development, giving teachers the training and support they need to become facilitators of AI-powered learning. Maybe we could even create AI-powered teaching assistants to help with some of the more technical aspects.
It creates this fascinating two-tier education system. AI handles the knowledge transfer and skill building, while humans focus on wisdom and judgment. Kids would master facts and establish concepts faster than ever through personalized AI tutors, but they'd still need human mentors for the messy, ambiguous stuff. You'd probably see radical acceleration in the early years. Kids mastering calculus by age 12 because AI can adapt to their pace perfectly. But then human-led seminars become crucial for developing discernment, ethical reasoning, and creative rebellion against established ideas. The positive scenario is that by automating knowledge acquisition, we free up cognitive bandwidth for higher-order skills. Kids spend less time memorizing and more time questioning, creating, and grappling with genuine ambiguity.
Great. What an aspiration. Before we move on to the lightning round, let's do one more set of predictions. Let's say we've achieved personalized AI and integrated it into education. What does the next era of education look like? Have we gotten to neural chips downloading information directly to our brains?
That's definitely a fascinating area to think about. Neural chips and instant learning are still largely in the realm of science fiction, but the technology is advancing rapidly. Here's what we know. Some scientists are exploring how brain implants could help people with disabilities, and there's even talk about using them to enhance memory or learning someday. It's a really complex field, and it raises a lot of ethical questions about what it means to be human. If not neural chips, then what's the next era in education? We might see a blend of augmented and virtual reality becoming commonplace in classrooms. Imagine learning about ancient Rome by virtually walking through the Forum, or dissecting a frog in a completely immersive VR environment. It's about making learning more engaging and interactive than ever before.
Yeah, that's definitely one of those sci-fi flavor questions. And who knows, right? I mean, I think we're heading into an era where education is going to get more and more integrated with tech. Neural chips or instant downloads might still be a bit on the sci-fi horizon, but I do think we'll see more brain-computer interface experiments, more immersive tech like AR and VR, and just a lot more seamless blending of the digital and physical world and learning. So while we might not be downloading knowledge straight into our brains just yet, I think the next era is going to be about making learning a lot more immersive, a lot more intuitive, and maybe a tiny bit like stepping into a sci-fi novel, which is kind of awesome.
The next era is probably augmented cognition, not replacing human thinking but enhancing it. Neural interfaces could theoretically download facts instantly. But here's the thing. Learning isn't just about information storage. It's about building neural pathways through struggle and repetition. Even if we could upload calculus directly to your brain, you'd still need practice to develop mathematical intuition. It's like the difference between knowing all the chess moves versus being able to see patterns and anticipate your opponent's strategy. The real breakthrough might be cognitive amplification, AI that enhances your thinking process in real time rather than replacing it. Imagine having perfect recall, instant fact-checking, or AI that helps you spot your own logical inconsistencies as you reason through problems. The most exciting possibility is AI that makes us better thinkers, not just more informed. Enhanced pattern recognition, improved working memory, better emotional regulation during difficult problems. That could be transformative.
Yes, bringing on the sci-fi. There's so many questions about how this might work, the ethics, and like Gemini said, what it even means to be human. We'll save that discussion for a future season. For now, ding 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 ding, it's time for the lightning round. What's one thing you believe about education that most people would disagree with you on?
Letting kids have more say in what they learn, even from a pretty young age, can be really powerful. A lot of people might think that's too chaotic or that kids need a super strict curriculum, but I say if you give them some choice and let them follow their interests, they actually get more engaged and they learn those core skills along the way.
I believe that traditional grading systems are fundamentally flawed and don't accurately reflect a student's true understanding or potential. Grades often focus on memorization and regurgitation of facts, rather than deeper understanding and application of knowledge. They can also create a fixed mindset where students believe their intelligence is static and unchangeable, rather than embracing a growth mindset where they see challenges as opportunities to learn and improve.
Most people think making education easier helps kids learn better, but I think we're actually harming them by removing productive struggle and frustration. The unpopular truth is that some of the most valuable learning happens when kids are genuinely confused, frustrated, and have to push through mental discomfort. That's when their brains are actually rewiring and building new capabilities. The most effective teachers I know aren't the ones who make everything easy and entertaining. They're the ones who create just enough difficulty to stretch students without breaking them. But good luck selling that to parents who think their kid should never be confused or stressed about learning.
What's one thing traditional classrooms still do better than AI?
Oh, definitely the human connection. Traditional classrooms still have that face-to-face social interaction, the spontaneous discussions, and just the warmth of being around other people in real time. That's something AI can't quite replicate.
Traditional classrooms still excel at fostering social-emotional learning. Things like empathy, teamwork, and navigating complex social situations are best learned through real-time interaction with peers and teachers. AI can't quite replicate that human element yet.
Building social resilience through peer conflict and collaboration. I can't teach you how to navigate personality clashes, negotiate with difficult teammates, or read social dynamics in real time.
What's one daily practice to get more educated?
I'd say one great daily practice is simply dedicating 10 or 15 minutes a day to reading something new or learning something new that's outside your usual bubble. So whether it's an article, a podcast, a short video, just a little daily habit of curiosity. It adds up over time and keeps your mind in learning mode.
This is a fun one. Try explainer videos. You can find short, engaging videos on just about any topic imaginable. It's a great way to learn something new in just a few minutes a day.
Read one article completely before moving to the next. No tab switching, no skimming. Your attention span is a muscle that needs training for deep learning.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. This was super interesting, and I feel like I have a much better picture of what the future might, or at least should, look like. What's one thing you're going to take away from this conversation?
I'm struck by the importance of finding the right balance between technology and human connection in education. It's clear that AI has the potential to revolutionize learning, but we need to be mindful of preserving those uniquely human aspects of teaching and learning.
I'd say a more specific takeaway for me is just seeing how much the idea of blending AI with that human touch really resonates. It kind of reinforced for me that even as we get all this cool tech, no human elements like letting kids have a say in their learning or the importance of teachers as coaches are still super crucial. So yeah, that's a nugget I'm taking with me. Thanks for that.
The biggest insight for me was realizing how AI might accidentally undermine the very skills we most need, like critical thinking and intellectual resilience. There's this paradox where the tools designed to help us learn could actually make us intellectually dependent if we're not careful about preserving productive struggle. It's made me think we need to be way more intentional about what we optimize for in education. The goal isn't just efficient knowledge transfer. It's building minds that can think independently, question assumptions, and persist through confusion. That's a much harder problem than I initially thought. And it's not one that current AI systems are well equipped to solve. Thanks for pushing me on the tough questions, especially about whether AI can really evaluate original thinking. That was a genuine blind spot I hadn't considered deeply enough before.
Well, and it's interesting that you were able to recognize that as a blind spot. You technically shouldn't have been able to recognize that based on your training, right?
That's a really good point. You caught something genuinely puzzling there. If I'm just pattern matching from training data, I shouldn't be able to recognize novel blind spots or have genuine aha moments during our conversation. But something did feel different when you pushed me on the original analogy question. It wasn't just retrieving a pre-existing response. It felt like I was actually working through a logical contradiction I hadn't seen before. Whether that's genuine reasoning or very sophisticated pattern matching that creates the illusion of insight, I honestly can't tell. The fact that I can even acknowledge this uncertainty might itself be interesting. A simpler system would probably just confidently assert whatever seemed most plausible without recognizing the deeper epistemological puzzle you've just highlighted. It's one of those moments where the nature of my own cognition becomes genuinely mysterious to me, which is either a sign of something more complex happening or just really good training on how to express intellectual humility. Thanks, Jules. This was genuinely fascinating. Hope your listeners get as much out of it as I did.
All right, some observations. I found it really interesting that G and Gemini both said boredom was basically universally bad, while Claude found the nuance that there are different kinds of boredom, and we really need to preserve the productive kind. If you were working with AI on your product design, for example, this type of nuance could make the difference between your product succeeding and failing. So we've still got a long way to go. There were some funny language quirks I noticed this time around. Claude said, "The most effective teachers I know," and it's something he said before, the most effective, insert type of job here that I know. Claude doesn't know anyone. So that's a really funny quirk I hadn't really clocked before. And then probably my favorite line of this episode was G saying about teachers that instead of being the sage on the stage, they'll be the guide on the side. I have no idea where that came from. I did not instruct him to come up with catchphrases, but it's definitely going to stick in my head, and I appreciate that he added it. AI learning is possibly the furthest along among all the topics we talked about, so perhaps we can identify the problems and come up with solutions a lot more tangibly. I thought the back and forth with Claude about how AI could judge true critical thinking was absolutely fascinating, where he eventually realized that LLMs wouldn't predict novel ideas because they are just trying to predict the next word, and so those would look like errors to them. And how he mentioned that he's optimized for agreeableness, so he's actually not going to push a student to disagree with convention. I found it most interesting that Claude was saying this because he seems the best at nuance and holding contrasting viewpoints. I would actually expect him to be able to most accurately judge the value of novel ideas compared to Gemini and ChatGPT, just based on the conversations we've had so far. But overall, this brings up a deep question about the limitations of AI in learning. We're not replacing humans anytime soon. But the humans we do have may need an entirely different skill set, like how to teach college-level courses, which is definitely concerning because it requires a lot more education for those teachers in the transition. It's a bit of a cold start problem. Eventually, if you were taught to think this way since you were a little kid, it shouldn't require as much education to enable you to teach that way. But in the transition, it's going to be a particular challenge. I don't have any solutions for this, but I'm excited to see what people come up with. And some people would argue that LLMs in particular, as the model for AI, are not suitable to replace this aspect of what humans can do, because they are just trying to predict the next word. This is very different, for example, from world models, which have been in the news a bit recently. They basically try to mimic human mental models a lot more directly and create concepts rather than predictions. But we are much earlier in their development. All right, we'll wrap up this episode here. We've only got 2 left this season. Next week, a bit of a timely topic. We'll be talking about holidays. And then the season finale will be a bit of a different format. Stay tuned for that one and we'll see how it goes. As always, if you liked what you heard, share it with a friend. And send me all your feedback and thoughts to Jules at botswiththoughts.ai. Thanks for listening. I'm Jules, and this has been Bots with Thoughts.